So I have speaker view, so it might be that you should mute yourselves because you'll show up if you make more noise than I do on the screen, and then unmute yourself at the point when you have something you want to share. So I'm going to make this bigger.
Select one.
All right. So, greetings. Greetings and welcome to the spring 2023 Belonging to Each Other and the Planet class. My name is Bob Heilbrunner, and as we move along, there'll be an opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves, and I'll introduce myself then, along with the rest of you guys introducing yourselves in more detail. The very short version of that is that this course is sort of my best effort to integrate. I'm 400 years old, so this is an attempt to integrate various stages of my development, which include having been a full-time activist studying economics and being an economist, having a great love and study of ecology, and then 20 years as a family therapist working for local Jackson County Mental Health. So this is my best way of trying to put stuff together in a way that I hope may be useful to someone. And of course, you'll see for yourself whether you find it useful for yourself. I'm guessing that I'm going to do one more. I need to change something in my view here. And I'm going to stop the recording while okay. I'm guessing that the people who've gathered to come to this class, which means they have gathered in response, at least in part, to the announcement of the class, that there's a broad agreement among us that we're living in a crucial and challenging time in human and planetary history. A time when the ancient networks of connection and cooperation and reciprocity that have sustained us as individuals and as a collective and as a culture and as a species and as a living planet, that those networks are frayed and unraveling. And that nature is telling us that the way that we've been conducting ourselves on this planet, partly as a species, but even more so in the current civilization, the version of humanity living in our current civilization, that the way nature is telling us that the way we have been conducting ourselves on this planet is unsustainable, and where we're faced with nature's increasingly stern and urgent call to come up with something new. That means we're living in a time of great fear and great grief and loss, and sometimes paralyzing dread. But take heart. But it's in the nature of things that times when old ways of being are no longer viable and are running their course, have run their course, those are the times that are most fruitful for the birth of something new. Which means that we, those humans representing our species at this moment in human and planetary history, that we, living in this moment, are living in a time of great loss and great fear. No, great loss and fear and great possibility. We're living, those of us living on the planet right now, we're living at a time of great loss and great possibility. Where that all is going to go is above our pay grade. Nature is going to decide whether the human experiment and much that we love that lives with us, whether that human experiment goes on or not. Nature will go on with or without us. Ours is not to know or to place our bets on the outcome. It's not to place our bets on either hope or despair. Ours is to participate in nature's process of moving ahead and healing itself. We are not going to save nature, but nature may find us to be worthy of contributing to its process of healing itself, just as it may find the mycelium in the ground, or the slime molds, or the birds, or everything else that participates in life and has a role in the process of nature's self-healing process. So we may be worthy instruments of nature. If we play it right, we may get to be worthy instruments of nature's process of healing itself. And then our job is to be the best version of Homo sapiens we can be, and to grow into the highest potential of our species that the nature's evolutionary process has resourced us with, has offered us, and supported our existence with. So towards that end, this course hopes to offer, I'm looking, it's not 4, it's 5 things. One is a clear and fearless critique of what we've got, what we got wrong, and to be as detailed and as clear and therefore as useful as we can, and not just vaguely generalized, but as precise and clear as we can be in understanding where we've gone wrong. To develop a clear understanding of the direction we need to take to heal what we've got wrong, which is to say, of the nature of the transition that nature is calling on us to make. So what's wrong now? Where do we need to go? And in this class, I'm also hoping to, and this has worked in the past, and we'll see how we do it, offer an opportunity to experience together the healing power of community. And particularly the healing power. One of the things I'm doing right now, I'm retired, but that I'm doing right now, volunteering with, is facilitating grief groups for people who've suffered traumatic grief. And in that, I've really had an eye-opening experience of the healing power of community. And particularly, since grief is love, right? When we think about our grief at what could be lost, a world with no rhinoceros or no tigers. When we think about, when we touch into our grief, that grief is love. Grief is love. And so community seems to have the healing power to help us transform grief together into a deeper love and a deeper participation in life. So I'm hoping that we build a community that And I see at least one member who's been in a previous class and a wonderful contributor to it. You know, to see how we can help each other out, basically. And depending on the size of the class, we'll have to figure out the mechanics of how that best happens. And I'm also hoping to offer some personal exercise so we can access the life force or nature or whatever you want to call it in us, to help us experience the fact that we are actually manifestations. We're not separate from life. We're manifestations of life. We're manifestations of nature. Nature lives in, nurtures, and motivates, and creates, and manifests us. And how do we access the nurturance and the power and the energy of nature and become manifestations and expressions of the life force as best we can? None of us going to do that perfectly, but how do we best resource ourselves to be handmaidens to nature? Handmaidens, pretty old-fashioned term. I don't know where that one flew in. And the fifth thing is to support each other, each of us finding our own best unique way to participate in the transition that needs to happen. That is to say, to kind of explore, of course, all of this will have to happen, not just in class, but in people's lives. But can we sprinkle something in through this class that will help people identify the areas where they can take part in the transition, which makes best use, which your most of your love, your passion, your accumulated wisdom, your skills, your talents, but most of all, your heart, your interest. So can we support each other in finding our place within it? And you'll see as the structure of the course develops that there's a very generous, it involves a very generous idea of what participating in it is, whether it's being a good neighbor or a good parent or you know, writing a book or leading demonstrations, or just any way that we live our life as though with an understanding that we're all in it together, helping people who are dying, just all the ways that we can participate in making the world the kind of place we wish it was. Now, take a breath. That's a lot. And I'm aware of how ambitious that agenda is. But I will say this is, I think, the fourth time. I didn't actually make sure of the number. Maybe it's fourth or fifth time that I'm presenting a version of this. And all of those times have, I've been delighted with the level of involvement and community that we were able to offer. And over Zoom, which I would not have believed when I started doing this. If it wasn't for COVID, I would never have thought about doing Zoom, and whatever rudimentary technological skills I had are all basically thanks to COVID. So for today, I'm going to start with the sort of the intellectual structure of the course. And today I'll be doing more talking than probably in other classes, although I will be presenting significant amounts of material each time. But what I want to start with today is the map. The sort of you are here. I love the pictures. I have one up here of the galaxy, and then there's a little thing that says you are here. So any journey or process obviously can only begin from where we are now, and it's only by acknowledging and being clear and being willing to accept that we're here now. It's only from that basis. It's the only place from which it's possible to begin. I think that's why the four directions have always been considered sacred by just about every culture, or six directions if you include up and down, as well as north, south, east, west. But because those four directions, it's about orientation, but it's also, and therefore it's about knowing your place in the scheme of things. So finding our place, knowing our place in the scheme of things, including where we're starting, seems like the starting point. Now, borrowing from David Whyte, I don't know who here knows about David Whyte, W-H-Y-T-E. He's a wonderful poet, and I have a list of poems and a list of readings that I'll send out. But this poem is, so borrowing from him, the organizing theme of this course is the notion that what we've got wrong is one mistake. There's one great mistake, and that mistake plays out in a paradigm that includes all the realms of our life, including the personal, interpersonal, ecological, international, spiritual. So one mistake. And after David Whyte, I'm dubbing this the great mistake. The great mistake. And now I'm going to put the poem up for everyone to see. I think I have it up already. I thought I had it prepped. I'm actually going to pause the So this is the poem. The poem is called Everything is Waiting for You. Everything is waiting for you. And I picture him, this is just my thing, but I picture him looking in a mirror and talking to himself in a way. Everything is waiting for you. Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone. Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone. As if life were a progressive and cunning crime with no witnesses to the tiny hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely even you at times have felt the grand array, the swelling presence and the chorus crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you freedom. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come. The doors have always been there to frighten you and invite you. The tiny speaker in the phone is your dream ladder to divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. I'm not sure if my cooking pots are doing that, but all the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you. So, your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone. And I'm saying that's the great mistake of us as individuals brought up and trained in this society. That's the great mistake of our civilization, and the great mistake that our species is prone to, although it's lived much of its, 99% of human history was not lived. It was lived with a clear sense of enmeshment and participation in the natural world. That's a recent invention. Some of this great mistake is a recent invention, even if our genetic potential for it has been there before. Okay, your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone. So our great mistake is to be blind to the utter and unalterable dependence of our existence on the nurturance of the vast network of mutual dependencies, cooperations, relationships, which make up the web, of life, and upon which everything that exists depends. So not recognizing that we are nourished by and depend on utterly the web of life, and which you could say basically our blindness to the connectedness and mutuality of things. Our great mistake is to believe ourselves to be separate from the rest of existence. The notion that competition between opposing interests is the organizing principle of life. That life is a zero-sum competition among separate and opposing interests. Now, I want to say, I'm not saying that that isn't part of life, but that the focus on that is the underlying organizing principle of life and existence is a great mistake. The great mistake is the notion that competition between opposing interests is the organizing principle of life, that life is a zero-sum competition among separate and opposing interests. That's part of the truth. Our great mistake, another feature of it, is to be blind to the way our actions, like the actions of every other living thing, contribute to the ongoing co-creation of the web of life. And thus being blind to our responsibility, thus our failure to take responsibility for the effects of our actions on the rest of life. So blindness to our effect on the rest of life, and therefore not taking not feeling that we need to take responsibility for our actions. And a corollary of that is essentially aloneness and alienation. A corollary to denying the dependence is to see ourselves as orphans, as alone and disconnected and abandoned by nature. To experience ourselves as alone and abandoned. And thus left alone, to feel compelled to fight for our survival in opposition to everything that we consider other. Now there's a bell, and I'm going to make sure that someone doesn't need to be let in. And as far as I can tell, there's not someone in you that in. I thought I had said it where everyone. But... All right. So a corollary is to feel lonesome. Well, a corollary is to feel lonesome, and therefore, since we're alone, to feel compelled to fight for our survival in opposition to everything we consider other than ourselves. Whether it's other individuals, other races, other cultures, other nations, other spiritual belief systems, other species, or the otherness the supposed otherness of nature itself. Now, this great mistake can be called by many names, but in its more general form, in this course, I'm going to call it narcissism or exceptionalism. Exceptionalism being the idea that we are an exception, that we're separate from and above everything else. And it can be summarized as, I'm just going to, the basic principles of the narcissistic or exceptionalist paradigm view of the world is denial of our dependency, unwillingness to take responsibility for our actions, feeling alone, disconnected, and abandoned, and in opposition, and here's the rub, therefore, feeling entitled to use, control, abuse, extinct, genocide the other whenever it serves our purpose to do so. That is to say, to see the other only as, at best, as a resource, and at worst, as an enemy to be destroyed. But to see the other as, to not see the other as having any right to existence of its own, and to see it only insofar as it's useful or unuseful, useful or a hindrance to us. This mistake of exceptionalism or narcissism reaches into all spheres of our lives and thus makes up what I'm going to call a narcissistic paradigm. But it can be, depending on the sphere in which it shows up, it can be called by many names. So it can be called narcissism in terms of individual psychology. It can be called colonialism in terms of relations between cultures. It can be called imperialism, takes the form of imperialism and the relationship between nations, racism between races, ecocide in ecological terms, fascism in political terms, unfettered corporate multinational capitalism in economic terms, dogmatic religious bigotry and conflict in spiritual terms, patriarchy in the relationship between the sexes, homophobia in terms of sexual relationships, and probably many other realms that it appears in. But in all those cases, it's the idea that whoever we is separate and above the other, and therefore justified in using, abusing, or killing the other. This course is structured around identifying both the great mistake and the birthing of its antidote in each of those concentric spheres of our life, and identifying the working of the narcissistic paradigm in each of these spheres. It's like how we bring up our children, you know, just as an example, you know, how we run our educational system, how we run our health system. This model appears. It's not the only thing that appears. There are really positive things, and there's a whole counter movement of other things. But in terms of the tradition, the paradigm, in terms of the fundamental paradigm that we're moving out of, and there are a lot of important ways that we're moving out of what we're moving out from. If we understand it, it's important to understand its pervasiveness, and that takes the form of a paradigm. And because its pervasiveness makes it almost invisible, like a fish in water. And by being invisible, it can work on us and influence us unconsciously through our intellectual structures, through our habits, through our institutions. Now, calling this a paradigm is intimidating insofar as you know, what that says is it really has us surrounded and can make us feel hopeless. But, the bright side of it is that paradigms, like everything else, are born to mature, to thrive, and develop, and then to disintegrate and to die. Paradigms have a life cycle, like everything in the world. Paradigms are created. When a paradigm is created, it opens a way of understanding the world that was, and of acting in the world that was impossible in an earlier way of looking at things. And over time, the blind spots of that paradigm start to get really important. And we've reached the point where the blind spots of our paradigm have become untenable. And that's when something new gets born. So the bright side of seeing a paradigm as this seeing this as a paradigm is to say that we're talking about a complex and fragile structure, an interconnected structure, like a Jenga game. And all those parts support each other, but all those parts also depend on each other. And that means that the paradigm can be resisted and transformed at each and every level where it touches and impacts our lives. Which means we can each be part of the transition from a narcissistic paradigm to its healing, wherever we're most moved and resourced to do it. Now, identifying what the narcissistic paradigm got wrong helps us to identifying the great mistake, points us to a way of healing its damage. So if narcissism is about power and conflict, the narcissistic paradigm is about power, conflict, domination, control, exploitation, othering, competition, using everything else as a resource for our own survival. So you could summarize that as seeing the world as a conflictual struggle. Let me look at this a second. Seeing the world as a battle for survival among opposing interests. Then the direction to heal that would be to celebrate and recognize and live in communion and belonging. So I'm going to say the transition that we're called upon to make is from a paradigm of narcissism to a paradigm of communion and belonging. And that would be a thing where a view that recognizes the interdependence of things, that's based on the cooperation and mutuality, and relatedness, and of which an interdependence and co-creation, and in which the dominant metaphors would be a chorus or a web or a network, relationship, conversation, mutuality. So all of the ways in which we would recognize that we are all in it together. We, people, species, nations, etc. We are all in this together. And one way of saying that is recognizing that the hole in the other guy's side of the boat is our problem. The hole in the other guy's side of the boat is our problem. So the goal of that transition is to move from narcissism and exceptionalism to communion and belonging, and to re-find our belonging to each other and the planet. And that might be a place to pause and see anything that people want to say. And it doesn't just have to be questions, of course. I don't like it when people say questions. Questions are fine, but you're certainly welcome to make statements as well. And I'm going to try and put my,
Thank you.
yeah. Go ahead.
This is Viva.
Hi,
Just
Viva.
thank you. That you verbalized things so beautifully for me. I'm all over the map with struggling with these things. I'm talking with people about conflict and competition and what it does to us, and what our economy does to us, and the way that everything works, and it is everything, and I have decided it's everything and recognized it, and I think and think and think about it, and have lots of it's my whole life, actually, is you're talking about what's going on with me exactly. And I am evolving with it, and I have made changes in my whole worldview and how I interact with everything. And I'm still undergoing changes, and I think the only thing that's different is the concept of, well, you say nature, and I have been working with the concept of which would be spirit or consciousness. I don't care what it's called, consciousness or
Yeah.
whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it's called, but that there's an underlying reality or energy behind everything, and just everything, even everything is saying the same thing. The scientific stuff, which I really don't understand, but how matter and energy are the same thing, and that nothing actually really exists, even though it does. I mean, when we started out, we were talking about a different dimension, that we've got all of these dimensions, and it is very exciting. I am so happy to hear someone else talking about my own inner craziness. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. I'm happy to share your craziness.
Thank you.
When we're going to talk about spirit, and one of the places that I think that this paradigm messes with us is separating spirit from matter, or to imply that spirit is somewhere else than in the bodies and physical structures of nature. So when I say nature, I mean, I believe that to be a spirit, an energy, and life, and including all its material parts, and not only that, but actually rivers and mountains and whatever else. So I think that, yeah, so that the spirituality is real, and it is embodied, and it happens in life, not somewhere else. It's not a separate realm in my belief system, and we'll talk more about that.
In mine also, I believe
Yeah.
there's only one thing. Okay,
Nice.
thank you.
Okay, cool, thanks. Kathy, you're mute. I hear you. I see you talking, but you're muted. There you go.
So I haven't used Zoom a lot. I want to also appreciate my gratitude for you so eloquently, putting describing the paradigm and giving hope that there is that we each are capable of that paradigm shift, and moving from the separateness to co-creating a world that takes care of each other and our planet.
Yeah.
And just a little bit of background: when I was like about 17 years old, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. Not sure I have yet, but I figured out. I put like on this sphere all these dots, and I thought about, until I figure out my unique purpose, I'm just going to give the best I can to that whole, and try not to make that whole worse. And I failed many times. I mean, I get angry, I have arguments, I can be a victim sometimes. But thank you for encouraging us. For me, it's that the hope again get back to that. And I'm also just working in small ways. I'm not sure as I'm so involved as Viva Vanessa described it being her life, but working in small ways. Like it seems like recently there is so much grief in this aloneness and competition, and also we're at a time. There's some good things about the pandemic and then terrible things about it, but it seems like we're all responsible for ourselves in a way. That we used to get customer service, and I've just been working in ways of trying to make the other an ally. I read it, I heard it somewhere, and I think this is an ally. How can we transform this together? So I'm just working in small ways to deal with how I feel challenged.
Wonderful.
To be the best person I can be.
Wonderful.
No.
Oh.
Well, Bob, I think that my paradigm's right, and I think all you guys should fall into that paradigm.
Absolutely.
No, I agree with what they said. This somehow puts a exclamation point on what I've been thinking. So thank you.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say anything new that nobody's heard. No chance. It's just, we all have our ways of putting it together, and hearing how someone puts it together can be helpful to others. Down the road, when we're sort of clear who's going to hang with this class, I'm going to be very interested in having everybody say what they brought, where they're coming from, what they're bringing, what they hope to come away with. But this is also a time where anyone can talk about that, or including whatever ways they, whatever reactions you have to what's been said so far.
It kind of occurred to me that the Native Americans, before we came here and tried to turn them into Christians and everything else, did have a very holistic approach to life, where everything was something, I mean, the rock could be spiritual, the tree, whatever, when they killed a buffalo, they would make honor it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful way of life. I mean, a wonderful way to, be alive. And it's like right now, when you look outside, it's windy now and cloudy, but the trees are going to push those leaves out. If there's a speck of sunshine, they're going to go boom. We're going to have green trees.
Nature go boom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all our relations, right? All our relations. I heard I wished I had taken the time to remember the name, but I just heard an Indian shaman talking. He talked for a long time, and at one point, he sort of took a breath from all the questions and said, "Okay, here's the thing: we were born to the garden, and you were kicked out of the garden." And we can talk more about that, but imagine having a creation story in which we are kicked out and separate from the garden. And in some way, we're either too good for it or too bad for it, or the garden is too good or too bad for us, instead of that we're living in it. So I could go on. Is this a time to do that? Put this thing on speaker view. All right. So we're going to talk more about belonging. It's sort of the key concept of this class. And we'll be defining it or exploring it further. But I want to say that belonging involves both finding, protecting, taking care of our place in the universe and our opportunity to be ourselves, and being able to, and being fully respectful of the rest of existence and finding our place in it. So essentially, to find a way to be good citizens of reality. So just to set that up, I don't want to be set it up as competition bad, let's all be nice, communion and connection is good. They all have their place and they're both part of life. And there's so to set the scene for that, everything that exists has had to, one, establish its place in the web of life, has had to protect, defend, and root itself and propagate itself. And that's why we have claws and teeth, among other things. So that's one part of it. And everything has had to weave itself into the complex web of cooperation and mutual relationships through which life co-creates itself. So belonging involves both of those, both separateness and competition, and cooperation and communion are part of life. Our culture preferences competition as the guiding force in life. And that's a balance that has to be, ultimately, the solution to a polarity is to find the underlying unity that unites the polarity. And we'll talk more about polarities as we go on. But you can see how this works in our theory, in the popular theory of evolution. And the popular notion, this is not the sophisticated notion of evolution, but the popularized view of evolution, which says that evolution is the survival of the fittest, implying that the biggest, baddest, meanest, most competitive thing gets to survive. So survival of the fittest is taken as the organizing principle, taken to be the organizing principle of evolution and therefore of life. And what that neglects is the equally, or maybe more important, principle that evolution is the survival of that which fits in. Evolution is not just the survival of the fittest, unless you define fittest in a much more sophisticated way. Fitness really is the survival of that which fits in, that which has found its place in the web of life. Now, most paradigms project their values onto nature. Like in the medieval system, there was the king, and there was the hierarchy of the royalty, and that was then projected onto nature and spirit. We have God, who's the boss, and the angels, and working down. And that projection was then used in turn to justify and authorize the existing relationships of power and exploitation. So by projecting the values of the exceptionalist or narcissistic system, which of course means that we are the exception and everything was made just for us, that by projecting that onto nature, that buttresses the claims of the existing system, because it says essentially the existing system is based on nature and human nature. That it's just that those values are the values of nature and human nature, and therefore ultimately immutable. It's just the way it is. that the values of our civilization just represent a realistic view of how the world is. And what that implies is that the transition that we're talking about, the transition to a paradigm of belonging, that transition is more or less hopeless because it's against nature. And if you're talking about doing a transition against nature, I don't like the odds. And not only that, if you think what you're doing is against nature, then you tend to feel authorized to use incredibly violent and extreme means because you're fighting nature. And you have to, it's sort of like what, deciding to teach the Native Americans that they better speak English and you allow yourself, if you think that, where am I going here? Yeah, if you think that what you're doing has to be imposed against nature, you are likely to feel authorized to use very extreme means, but even more important, that's pretty hopeless. So that's why that ideological view of evolution is a really important buttress of the existing system and its relationships of power and privilege. But we would not be here if nature hadn't also bequeathed us through the evolutionary process the adaptations and resources necessary to fit in and belong. If the evolutionary process had not also bequeathed us the adaptations necessary for cooperation and belonging and fitting in, we would not be here. Evolution is the survival of that which fits in. And if we hadn't learned how to fit in, we wouldn't be here. Now, we may be acting in new ways that is using up our welcome, but those are new ways. Those are not inevitable aspects of human nature. And one of the things we'll be exploring is there's a whole movement of evolutionary biologists that has uncovered and celebrated and studied and brought to broader consciousness the pro-social instincts, the instinctual adaptations, the instinctual built-in heritage that supports a pro-social genetic inheritance. And that we have inherited the genetic resources necessary and adaptations necessary to support us and help us find our belonging to each other and the planet. We are resourced to belong. And that's kind of the end. That's sort of the end of what I want to present today. And let's open it up to anything people want to say. And all of this is, oversimplified. All of this can be expanded on and understood in more complex detail. So I'm going to gallery view here. And I'd love to hear from anybody who wants to share. Susan, I think you're talking. There you go.
I'm afraid I'm going to go into my Debbie Downer space for a minute.
Uh-oh.
Although I'm not all there.
You can't go up if you can't go down. So
I love everything you've said and what other people have shared. And I used to be able to feel very hopeful about change, especially it helps me to look at the big picture, the big waves of history and politics and culture and human, because once you do that, you can see how, what is it, Martin Luther King said, the arc moves slowly, but towards justice. But lately, and it's probably because I'm embedded in this current time and world, you mentioned human nature, and it's frightening to me. On the one hand, in our culture, I'll just speak of America at the moment. I do know that when people try to change the paradigm or extend it in the way I would like, which is what you're talking about, pro-social community, etc. Sooner or later, there seems to be backlash from the old ways, or not the old ways, but the modern old ways, the other paradigm you're talking about, the competitive, violent, and it seems so extreme to me right now. And it is extreme. And just reading today, one issue of all the states that have decided not to support trans people in one way or another. And to me, that whole push is just one more, the good push, I call it good, is one more way to be inclusive and pro-social. And the people that are afraid of that or disagree with that are really coming on strong. So, and they have been for a while now. But I also know that these things, ebb and flow in our society. I'm starting, everybody I know, because that's who I hang out with, feels the way I do. And obviously other people in other places feel the way they do. And they would argue the same thing, maybe, that what I feel, what you have just talked about, is utter nonsense. And it just seems the fight, the push, the backlash is more than usual. It may not be. There are many periods in history that, were certainly just, a horrible mess. World War II, all kinds of things. So I am having trouble, I want to, but I'm having trouble lately holding on to some hope. And I sometimes think maybe I'm not going to see the change that I believe in my lifetime. I'm not sure. So, sorry.
I think, Susan, go ahead, Bob.
Well, there's a wonderful song by Iris DeMint, who's the wife, I think, or partner of Greg Brown. And the song is Working on a World I'll Never See. It's a very touching song. I can sing that out. I'm sorry, Jimmy.
No, I didn't. I think what Susan is saying is the cycle that we all go through. It's like, and it can get overwhelming. But I think the only thing I can ever do, that I ever do myself to help that, is to realize that whatever I do can affect the future. There's a group, I took an intro to racial justice class, which dealt with a lot of the same things you were just talking about, Bob. Oh, hi. This is my 4-year-old grandson.
Oh, hello.
You gotta say hi?
Hi.
Say hi.
Hi.
Yes, hello. We're all in little boxes here.
Yeah, Atlas is a good guy.
I bet.
He's a good man. He's 4. He just turned 4 Sunday. But that's the reason I do what I do, or that I try and do it. And I feel like if I can make little changes, then that's going to help down the road. And this intro to racial justice class there's a group, and it's seniors that are seniors anti-racism group, which is really encouraging. You know, and it's like, we're not going to be around to see the end of racism, but we can build the platform, and we can say, hey, this is how we can, you know, hopefully that's what I'm going to figure out in this class. How do we build that platform? Anyway, I think, Susan, I'm trying to affirm your feelings.
Thank you.
Well, I think that
It's-
we are all incredibly challenged to find our way to relate to all of
I
that.
just like to say one thing.
Yeah.
When I was a young woman, I belong with some other people to something called the All Species Coalition.
Ah.
And our motto was end human chauvinism.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think, you know, still we have to be really aware of not just humanity, but, you know, the Buddhist thing, all creatures. And that we, because the way we've evolved with brains and tools, we have become the managers of this planet. And it's up to us. We can't just, I think there's a tendency to say those people over there who are doing this and that's wrong and I'm right. But I think, I don't know. I mean, when I go to the grocery store, for example, I mean, a tiny thing, I want a sandwich and it's encased in plastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have this battle with myself. I mean, the plastic is causing so much harm, single-use plastic to the, and I think, well, but, you know, I'm hungry and it's convenient. And so I think each of us can look at ourselves as well as other people, and how do we make these little choices and also communicate that to others, not just in a blame way, but in a, you know, what can I do way? What can I do personally to make a difference? And I think of also, you know, you might not think it makes a difference, but I think of organic foods, for example. People are willing to pay more for those. Why? Because of awareness. And how does awareness happen? Because of communication. So I like everything you're saying about we're not alone. We have to share our responsibilities too.
So
That's it.
I gave a training for Winter Spring. I don't know how many folks know. Winter Spring is a volunteer organization that provides groups for people in mourning and grief, and they're divided up in different kinds of grief. And so how do we get to this? I have no idea what I was going to say. Yes, I did. So I'm giving, as I'm talking about all the different kinds of grief, where I teared up was grief, how far the world is different than I imagined it could be when I was an active 60s, 70s activist. That's what hit me most. So I think grief is important, and I think grieving is an important part of what we need to do to heal. So that's one thought I had. And another thought I had was let's take time at some point to talk about what's going on, not with the total Trump fanatics, but what's going on with the following. How can it be that people are joining up in some way to this? And I think there's ways that this way of looking at it, there's ways to understand that are helpful, which is mostly that they're working from the same instinctual structure we are, and they feel that their world is attacked and collapsing, and that they are powerless in it. and that and they're angry, really angry about it, and they're angry for a lot of the same good reasons that people who think more like what's been expressed in this group are. So but that's a very short statement, but I think we can understand. There's ways to understand what's going on with those people that has to do with the sense that they feel robbed of a meaningful place in a meaningful whole. And what I think is that we have an instinctual structure to want to be meaningful and empowered and respected members of a meaningful whole. And when we don't get that, we are angry and frustrated and alienated. And when we don't get that, we are vulnerable to faux participation, faux meaning, and a faux whole. So but that's of course a much longer conversation. And I think, let me see the time, we're just about out. On the issue of motivation, Susan, one of the places I'd go, but it's fine to just fall in the hole. And because if you let yourself fall in the hole, you will come up. You won't disappear forever. And we don't want to be dog paddling and trying to make ourselves feel good and drawing pictures of I don't know, fairies and tulips or whatever. You know, that's not going to really give us a sense of belonging. So, but there's someone, and I always have to be reminded who, and someone here will know, but there's a teacher who studied vast range of spiritual practices, and she said she summarized it as, and let's see if I can remember, as four things, I think, and it was show up, speak. I've got it now. Show up, speak the truth, do your best, and here's the shitty one: don't be attached to the result.
Right.
Show up, speak the truth, do your best, and don't be attached to the result. And because the result doesn't belong to us. The result, there is no result ultimately, but the result belongs to the universe.
Exactly.
So now,
That's great. And just to clarify, I don't live in the hole, and I'm
Yeah.
happy about what I do personally to contribute, and my friends do. But I do have these moments where I slide back down there. I think I was born a warrior. I think I have the warrior gene.
well, I'm
And
really
I
glad that we
A
found things for you to worry about. Imagine what you would do
but I became a
in
warrior.
a different world.
And so thank you all for hearing that here.
Okay.
And
Thanks for sharing.
yeah, I'm thank you.
Really important. The last thing I want to do is be selling some kind of ungrounded bright-sidedness.
Oh,
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been a pleasure and an honor. I hope to see you guys next week. And there we are.
thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.